Today we are going to combine the logos of famous companies.
Combination.
But these aren't just any companies, no. These are competing companies. So first up, let's see what we get when we combine Google and Apple. Okay, so the first thing to do was to acquire both of these logos in vector format. So I did sketch out some ideas, but I don't want to show you them because it will give the game away. So I'm just going to show you how I built them in Illustrator. So let's get into this. Right, so the first step was to take the Apple logo and split that into two different sections, because the next stage I just needed the body of the apple separate to the top little leaf section. Then it was a case of offsetting the path to kind of create a stroked apple instead of like a filled apple, which is what they use currently. Just wanted to make sure that was thick enough to kind of match the G of the Google. So once I was happy with that, it was time to add the little crossbar of the G. And I thought the best way to do that was just by adding a rectangle and setting that to black. And then to create the gap, I just made another box and set that to white. And then I did actually let my OCD get the best of me and make sure that the gap was half the size of the actual stroke itself, like the stroked apple that we have now. So once I was happy with the overall composition in black and white, I just selected everything and with the shape builder tool pressed Alt and wiggled over the white areas, and then pressed nothing, just had the shape builder selected and wiggled over the black areas, and then made that black because for some reason it went to white. So now that I have my stroked apple G, it was time to add the colors in. So I thought the best way of doing this is by making a grid of colors and then using a clipping mask. So I drew out the 4 squares, slapped them behind the logo. So I had to reunite the leaf and the body of the apple G by creating a compound mask, which is Command and 8 on the keyboard, and then selecting that and the background grid of colors I've made and pressing Command and 7 made a clipping mask. I had to do a little bit of fannying around just to make sure the colors didn't look weird. I wanted to make sure the divide of the two colors was hitting the sharp points of the logo, just so it looked natural and flowing. And then at this point, I liked the look of it, I liked everything about it, and although the Google G doesn't really use rounded corners on the extremities of the the crossbar on the G, I just found that this, because we got the bite taken out of it, everything was looking a little bit sharp and aggressive, so I thought I'd round off some of the corners just to counteract that a little bit. So this, I think, is looking pretty good. And all we needed to add is a word mark. So Google, add Apple. To me, there's only one thing that can mean: Goople. And because the actual logo looks like a clean combination of Apple and Google, I think it's about balanced. I thought to make the word mark balanced, as Goople sounds more like Google than it does like Apple, I thought the best thing to do would be use the Apple font SF Pro, and the SF stands for San Francisco. Now, although I like that, long-term viewers of the channel will know that I can't ever just do one option. I'm too indecisive for that. So I thought the next idea was to take the old Apple logo, the one that everybody knows, the one with the rainbow colors going through it, and create a Google version of that. So the first thing I had to do was get our proportions right. So basically I just drew a load of rectangles over the old logo. And then once I have my proportions right, I just used the Google colors and I just rotated them round from the green, because the Apple logo starts at the top with a green, and just kept rotating that through until I was done, and then did the same thing. I did a clipping mask, but with the full out Apple logo this time, and then I added the word mark again. And then I thought, to be honest, right, the thing that most people think of when you think of the Google logo is the actual logo that you see when you visit the search engine, and that doesn't have the G at all. It just has the Google, but in the brand colors. So I thought we'd do a
combination
here, and we would use the Apple font but the Google colors, and mixed with the Google colors and the Apple retro logo. And then, to be honest, I nearly forgot, but one last look at the Google logo and I realized that the thing that was missing is the E being rotated around a little bit. So I did that in the character palette, and for some reason it made the kerning go mental, so I just rekerned that, and I think, here we go, this is it. Okay, so here are our final two options for this one. So for Google, let me know what you think in the comments, left or right option. 1 is on the left, 2 is on the right. Right, so next up is the fierce competition, the worldwide known competition of Marmite and Nutella. So what logo are we going to make when we use a
combination
of these two? So my main idea was to use the strongest parts of each logo, which was the ribbon of Marmite and the text of the Nutella. The first part of this project was to create the ribbon. So I built out a few different ellipses and positioned them all over the ribbon just to align with everything that I need to cut out. And then I got in a little bit of a muddle, but then I managed to sort myself out and get my life back on track with the shape builder tool. And that provided me with some crescent shapes, and then I just used the line tool and then the intersect tool. And then once I had that, flip it. And then once I flipped it, I just positioned them exactly together and then used Pathfinder to combine the two shapes. So to finish the ribbon off, all I had to do was put a black stroke on there, fill the inside with red, and then fill in that little gap that shows like the back of the ribbon in the shadows. I just filled it with black, and then we were good to go. Now Marmite and Nutella combined can only mean one thing: Nutella. Now the ribbon was looking good, it was time to add some of that text. Now you see the text on Nutella, it's nice and clean, and the font that I've got that was the closest, or the font that I could think of that was the closest, was called Chalet. And the beauty of Chalet is that it has a few different like cuts and a few different styles. So things like the A obviously doesn't look right here, but then when you use a different cut, it was the perfect Nutella A. And although the Nutella looks a little bit thicker, I think this is going to be fine to create this combination packaging. So obviously, because we've got the red ribbon on Marmite and the red text on Nutella, we can't see red on red. So what I'm going to do is keep the M as black, the same as the Nutella logo, and then flip them colors round so the UTELLA goes white because we're on the red ribbon. This is going to give us the most professional, realistic look. Skewing this onto the ribbon is a little bit of a funny one, because to do that we have to stack the arc lower and the arc upper on the warp options. I know there is another way of doing this, which is the envelope distort, but I thought this was, I don't know why, I just chose to do it like this. By looking in the appearance palette, I could go in and readjust that. That's the beauty of the appearance palette and these warp options, is that once you do it, it's not non-destructive, so you can go back and adjust it. So I could keep fiddling that until it looked about right on there. Now something was telling me to make the text all caps like the Marmite logo, but then I felt like, because we're using the Marmite shape packaging, the Marmite ribbon, I just felt like if we went caps as well, then we're not really being fair to the Nutella brand. Right, so the Marmite packaging says yeast extract, but because we are beasts of design, there's only one thing we can put here, and that is beast extract. So again, using the Chalet font and a warp, we get that in position looking extra nice, extra tidy. So where I was doing a naughty mock-up in Illustrator, I had to open the original JPEG of the Marmite packaging and then just clone stamp out some of the parts that I could see behind the ribbon that I'd drawn in Illustrator. I mean, it's not the best way of doing things, but I think it's good enough for this project, you know. This is what we've got for a combination of Nutella and Marmite. We have Nutella available in superstores near you. So next up on this logo combination video, we have FedEx and UPS, two delivery companies. So the first thing to do with this one was to get Futura Bold, that classic font, and overlay that onto the FedEx logo. Super tight kerning. Let's get that looking good. Now everybody knows it's like the most worst kept secret about the arrow that's in the FedEx logo. Between the E and the X, I mean, you've definitely seen this. So that to me is something that is so iconic, it has to stay in our logo combination. So right, we got FedEx and we got UPS. So I think the only company name we can use for this is FedUps. I've got a few different ideas in my head. Here is the first one. We're going to add that all iconic arrow to the top of the stem of the U and the top of the stem of the D and combine them. I think it's got a good uplifting look, and it definitely implies movement, which is what we're going for here. And also we've got a bit of double meaning here, because now it's called Fed Ups, the arrows are pointing upward. So I'm calling that a perfect combination. But you know, this is Rebrand everything. We just can't stick to one idea. For this one, we're going to put Fed next to UPS, ups, and create the arrow inside some sort of negative space with a bit of careful fiddling of my triangle here between the thickness of the stems on the two letters. We got this. I think that works nicely as well. Now, at this point of the creation, I went to bed, got up, did a full day's work, got home, had another look at my logos, and thought, do you know what? There's one thing we need here, and that is a third option. Instead of butting up the D right to the U, I thought we need to make more of this negative space. So I added a triangle on top and then another triangle on top of that. And then I split them up into their two colors so it fits. And I thought that was just a nice, another way of doing it. Another little negative space logo. But these are all three options next to each other. Top left is option 1. Top right is option 2 and the bottom one is option 3. Let me know what you prefer in the comments, please. Thank you. And there we go. One more combination logo. Okay, so the fourth and final logo combination of this video is Netflix and Amazon Prime. And if this voiceover sounds a little bit different, it's because it was recorded while I was actually doing it. So this is, just consider it like a live feed. So my idea here is to take the most iconic parts of each of the brands. So I'm pretty sure this font is just kind of like bog standard and it's kind of badly kerned as well. So I'm just going to get rid of that and keep this arrow. And then we are going to change this into an A shape for Amazon, because I think that Amazon is more of a recognizable brand than Prime. And plus these days when you say Prime, people think of the energy drink anyway, rather than anyone I know that's talking about Amazon Prime just calls it Amazon Prime. They never just say, oh, it's on Prime, because I don't know why, they just don't. So I feel like these are the two strongest parts of each logo. So that is what I'm going to combine. I was today years old when I realized that the Netflix icon has the curved bottom just like the logo. That is a nice little touch. So I'm going to whip that off. To retain this curve on the bottom is going to be nice and easy for me just by flipping this thing over, because you see here the shadow is quite small and then here it gets a lot bigger. So we don't want the shadow too big. And it needs to rotate round so it's less at one end and more at the other end. But it's not perfect because this has like a darker section. I think what I need to do is copy and paste this, add a little drop shadow or outer glow. Definitely not screen, we want that to multiply because we're using a darker color. Now I only want that small just to give us this, and then we need to duplicate this, paste that in front, and then use that as a clipping mask for the new shape I made with the outer glow there. So I'm going to do Command 7. Right, no A is complete without the bar across the middle. I've got two options here. One is keep the whole arrow and make that like the cross beam of this thing. But I'm looking at that now and I'm thinking that's going to be way too wide to be usable. Don't want a circle, we want a line. Exactly over that line. Smart Guides is helping me here big time. And do the same outer glow that I did earlier. Red next to blue. It makes this funny, weird thing happen with my eyes where it looks like I'm wearing 3D glasses or something. That's another option. Okay, so the voiceover was a little bit fluffed up because it turns out it's actually really hard to talk through your work while you're working, because then what you get is just a big load of convoluted messages in tiny little forms, and then a 5-second break, and then another few words, then a 5-second break. But basically what's happening in this little time lapse here is me just creating 2 more options using similar techniques to earlier. If you have any comments, if you have any questions about any of the techniques that you see here, just bang them in the comments and I will get back to you. Okay, so we've got 4 options of this one. We've got Netflix combined with Amazon Prime. Top left is number 1, top right is number 2, bottom left is number 3, bottom right is number 4. Let me know what your favorite is in the comments. Combination.